So, hello everybody, and welcome to our Curia and UKI webinar snap review of the industrial strategy. We've got with us today, we've got Sarah Smith, MP of the Housing Communities Local Government Committee. We've also got a former MP, Matt Warman, former Digital Minister. As well as those two, we're joined by Sarah Costens-Winterton of the Energy Efficiency Infrastructure Group. We're joined by Mark Harris, co-chair of Labour YIMBY, Labour Pro Housing Pressure Group, and we're also joined by Daniel Patterson of Electrify Industry. So before we dive into the areas that you're all specifically expert in, this latest policy is a kind of a stream of recent policies and white papers that all seem to complement each other and seem to be aiming for a holistic approach. Do you think, does anyone on the panel think that that's an effective approach that will come to fruition, or do you think that that is more of a communications strategy? Who'd like to start?
If I may start, I mean, I don't think this is a communication strategy at all. I think this is something that we've needed in the UK for a good long time now. It's fantastic to see that this government is delivering on it within 12 months of coming to power. We at Make UK are very, very excited about some of the things we're seeing in this industrial strategy, and we see it as being a force for good in terms of UK industry and in terms of UK growth and productivity. There are things, of course, where there are areas, of course, where we would like to see the government has, and that is the same of any trade, to see more work harder and faster. But the broad scope of it is good news for industry and good news for the UK economy. I don't think you could characterise this in any way as a simple PR exercise. It's something that has been a long time in coming, and we're grateful to see it here.
No, and I think you're right. It does seem like government departments are all kind of pulling in the same direction. But if we could turn to our parliamentarians, do we think that through all the amendments and all the readings that all these different white papers will, by the end of it, still be pulling in the same direction? Sarah, would you like to chime in?
Yes, absolutely. I think, this government is serious about finally giving businesses the certainty and the longer term strategies and vision that they need to be able to make decisions around really significant investments, in any area. And you've got, a number of hugely important bits of legislation coming forward. You've obviously got the industrial strategy. We've also got the planning and infrastructure bill, which is really important, clearly. We've got the infrastructure strategy still to come forward, and of course the work of Skills England, which you see some of, obviously in the industrial strategy, but again, that's not the end, and there'll be a lot more coming forward on that angle as well. And alongside that, the the Green Book review undertaken by the Treasury, really, really significant for places like Hyndburn that I represent, that for decades have been ruled out of the investment that they need by the Treasury rules. And I think this is such an exciting time. And of course, as well, we've also got, the huge moves forward around devolution. But that's not to say, there's a lot to pull together, and it's difficult. Of course it is. But I think, I'm absolutely confident that in the end, it, is a coherent piece that will be coming together, and with a real desire to get this as right as we can. You can never make perfect policy fundamentally. That's, life is imperfect, and but to really get this to be as strong as it possibly can, to give businesses the confidence and the certainty that they need to make the investments that across the country.
If I might go to you, Mark, what you do at Labour YIMBY, you're out there fighting the good fight and arguing for infrastructure and housing to be built. And infrastructure is something that underpins so much of the industrial strategy. From that perspective, how do you assess the industrial strategy? Is there anything more you'd like the government to be seeing and doing, or are you satisfied?
So we're never satisfied. That's the first thing. We're never satisfied. We're always pushing on. I think this government has done amazing things when it comes to planning, when it comes to infrastructure, when it comes to home building, but there is always more to do. I think what's really encouraging about this industrial strategy is the long-term nature of it. It sets out over a number of years, particular commitments, particular priorities, particular reforms, a lot of major investment in R&D and in skills and in infrastructure. Hundreds of billions of pounds over 10 years. And that's really, really encouraging. But if we're going to make it more than just that, more than just, a comms exercise and some announcements, we really do need to make sure that we follow through on that delivery. The planning, infrastructure, the reform bill is coming through Parliament now. We need to make sure that when it comes out the other end, that it is in as fit a state as we would like it to be, that it delivers on the promises in the manifesto, in the campaign, and since. So that's going to be really, really key. So yes, huge reasons for optimism, but we now need to make sure that the government follows through and pushes on as much as possible.
And just briefly, we've got two Sarahs. We've got Sarah S and Sarah KW. And infrastructure is, as we say, underpinning so much of this. And if I could go to you, Sarah KW, how do you think energy efficiency should be and sustainability can be built into infrastructure throughout the whole process of it being delivered?
Okay, so firstly, EIG is about home retrofit, home upgrades, and we represent the retrofit supply chain from manufacturers to the retailers. And we're really, really centered about that good consumer journey, but also ensuring that consumers, whether they're local authorities with tenants or private homeowners, they actually get what it says on the tin of whatever is going into their homes. So we are tech agnostic. We represent, as I said, the supply chain. So we look at this with slightly different eyes. Obviously, really welcome anything that supports British business, existing or new, and contributes to the current and future economic growth, as well as reduces energy costs. But we're really looking here at the kind of clean energy industry sector and the context of that, where we very much feel that the political narrative is really pitting clean heat versus energy efficiency and demand reduction. You get very little reference to energy efficiency or any detail, and particularly also demand reduction. And there is a vital relationship between the two. They're actually coexistent. So to decarbonize your housing stock, for instance, you do need energy efficiency, fabric, dare I say, insulation, to make sure that we can genuinely lower bills. Yep, if in new builds, that isn't so much of an issue, but we're talking about 20 plus million homes in the retrofit market. So we really want to obviously see how this transfers to the Warm Homes Plan. And we are really seeing very split narrative on this. So one side, we're seeing obviously this dedication and commitment to clean heat, but at the same time, in the policy, we are discussing with DESNZ, we're seeing the blending out and kind of sidelining of issues, measures such as insulation. And particularly, we're really, really worried about this. We're seeing it with Eco5, which is the flagship fuel poverty policy, where basically at the moment on the current trajectory, the direction of travel, there'll be little to no insulation. That just means that for fuel poor people, their bills can potentially go up. So we are hyper focused on this. We are on red alert. Very, very positive, but we need to see the detail. We need to see those positive, kind of supporting policies to give that flexibility to the industry to deliver.
And of course, we can't talk about sustainability and decarbonisation without going to you, Dan. What's your reaction been on that front over the past day or so?
I think it's a very good start. It's a step in the right direction. We're of course delighted to see the supercharger for energy intensives move from 60 to 90%. It's an important part of the industrial strategy. In addition, the BIC scheme, the British Industrial Competitive Scheme, is incredibly important for that next 7,000. What I would say is there's 200,000 manufacturers in the UK. So what we need to do now is start working with government to ensure first that the BIC scheme comes in. We would like to see it coming in 2026, not 2027. We have to accelerate that, bring that forward. And the next thing to do is really start talking to government about what the next stage of this is, what the next step of this is. Because if
Daniel, we're struggling to hear you a bit.
Thought this job was done in terms of
Daniel,
decarbonisation and sustainability within industry and really getting the best out of net zero for the UK economy in terms of growth. Very far from true. We have a long way to go with this. Oh, is that? Hello?
Yeah. It came back a bit at the end there.
Hello, can you hear me?
But we got the kind of the start and the end.
Yeah, I apologise.
Not a problem.
The joys of an unstable connection.
And so, Matt, let's turn to you. One of the things that's acknowledged in the kind of digital and tech subsector plan is that there are energy and infrastructure barriers currently to the ideal AI growth that we'd like to see. And so, what's your take on that? What do you want the government to be doing on that front? And then perhaps after that, can we go to Mark, because you're all about tearing down barriers to infrastructure?
No, I think that's the right question to be asking. And apologies for my lack of video, which I can't quite fathom. But what I would say is, with all of this, the devil is in the detail, right? Whether it is, as you've heard, sort of the example from Hyneburn, it's sort of you've got to adjust the rules that allow people to address, that allow the Treasury to address the lack of investment historically in the huge chunks, in particular the North, the Midlands, big. Sunak began. That's something that this government is continuing. That is welcome, but the devil is in the detail. And I think with all of these high-level documents, really the question should be what happens next, and that's the question I think everyone needs to be asking. And we.
Matt, I think we've lost you. Are you there?
Perhaps it's
Okay.
demonstrating that one of the things that's holding the UK back is the lack of good connectivity and 5G infrastructure. I know I sit in a sort of black spot of that in my constituency, and it's one of the things I'm seeking to improve. But I mean, we can sort of laugh valley, but this is a really serious problem. As part of the government's objectives, we have to see that rolled out. Sorry to come in there.
Yeah, and we've of course we've seen an announcement on that today with a phone service on major train lines. Mark, as I say, you're all about tearing down barriers in terms of infrastructure and energy infrastructure. What's your take?
Yeah, absolutely. So as you mentioned, there was actually quite important announcement today. I know it might sound boring to some people, but actually the lack of phone signal, mobile phone service, internet service on trains is really hugely important. I know people who talk about taking the train into London or around the country through the working day, and that could be 2 or 3 hours where they could actually get some work done. In fact, it might be better to get on the train to be able to get work done than to be in a car or somewhere else, but they can't because they don't have the connectivity. And this is a solved problem, right? Other places around the world enable you to use the internet on a train. The fact that we can't do that reliably is a big problem. So this announcement from the government is one of the things. Might sound boring, but I think it's really, really important. From an ABNB's perspective, yeah, of course, we want the government to do things like introduce more automatic planning permission for energy and infrastructure projects that align with a national priority. Grid upgrades is a huge thing, of course. We've got bored saying it, but it's so true. It's not just the power plant, the solar farm, the wind farm. It is the grid upgrade to get the power into people's homes and into people's businesses that's so important. Fast tracking those grid connections. It's part of the industrial strategy. It's mentioned in the industrial strategy. We need to go further with that. Clear statutory timelines would certainly help. Trying to make sure that people get in the queue and get out of the queue as quickly as possible. Also, a creation of an infrastructure acceleration zone where planning and permitting are simplified for these kind of strategic clusters. That would also help. But also on a localism level, government empowering metro mayors with land assembly, infrastructure delivery powers. Perhaps on the lines of development corporations, that would also help. So there's a variety of things that the government could and should be doing to push further. And yeah, Labour is going to be pushing them to do that every step of the way.
And as well as the physical infrastructure that underpins much of the industrial strategy, there's also people at the heart of it and interwoven throughout his skills. And that's some of your background as well, Sarah S. And I'm just wondering what you think about the skills aspects of today's industrial strategy, the other day's industrial strategy.
Yeah, thanks. And I think it's also worth saying, with 2 Sarahs on the call, that it's National Sarah Day. So I'm just going to throw that out there. I'm sure there's some Sarahs watching as well. Look, the whole reason I got involved in politics in the first place is because, I think it's incumbent and essential for the future of our country that it doesn't matter where you grow up, you have the same chances, the same opportunities to thrive and to realise your potential, and that's just not true. And the skills strategy and the youth guarantee are absolutely vital to the government's opportunity mission and ensuring that we move away from the absolutely I'd say criminal situation that we're in right now, where 1 in 8 young people finishing school are not in education, employment and training, or unemployed. Because often, unfortunately, if you're sort of neat for 6 months or more, the chances of you ever then sustaining a decent job, the data tells us, are quite low, and your life chances are significantly held back, by that. And so within the spending review, within the industrial strategy, there's a commitment of £1.2 billion to help tackle that. And within the policy around youth guarantee, it's basically ensuring that every 18 to 21-year-old is guaranteed an apprenticeship, a job opportunity, or a good training, further education, higher education opportunity, so that we can change the trajectory on those figures and get every young person who can into a chance and into a career for their future. But it's not just about young people, although for me that's really important. We also recognise there's work going on as well around reskilling, upskilling, opportunities for older people. Again, in Hyndburn, the reality is that we've got some very low kind of average wages, and a lot of people held back because of their the level of their education. And I think, the focus on adult skills as well is really important. Then it's also kind of connecting the different pieces, the growth and skills levy and the changes that we're making there, so that now businesses can spend 50% of that on apprenticeships, but have the freedom and more flexibility around the other 50%. And clearly, again, there's more detail needing to come out to clarify exactly the scope for that. But I think that is really welcomed by businesses, and hopefully will mean that money is now put to much better use and aids productivity and economic growth. But a few other things, another piece that's come out today, which won't have got much attention, but I think is really exciting. And I don't know if you're going to come into this, but also the work around procurement and government procurement, and really significant shift that this government is taking on that agenda. And yeah, as I say, maybe it's something that we'll touch upon later in the conversation, because there's a lot to speak into on that agenda as well.
We'll try and get to Matt again while we bring up skills. Skills is obviously a large part of AI, with it being such a kind of nascent industry, and that's partly mentioned in this industrial strategy. If we might go to you, Matt, are you there? And what's your take on that?
Yeah, no, and again, I sort of come back to this point that the devil is in the detail on all of this. So Sarah is right to say that there's a big shift in government procurement. At the same time, you talk to SMEs today or in the last couple of days, and they will say to you, what is it that this is actually going to mean on the ground? And I think all of these, as I said earlier, I'm not sure how much you call all of these big high-level documents, you've got to say the announcement is sort of 10% of the deal. The implementation, the practicalities are where you're going to sort of win or lose, and that's the challenge that the government has to address. But equally, I think you also have to say all of skills is a big challenge. It is something that every government would have been doing. What is the special part that this government is doing?
Matt, I think we've lost you. We'll go to Sarah at KW then, because we've and maybe Mark as well a bit on this, because a large part, obviously, of skills is enabling people to be able to move to where they want to go for work. And so, how do we reconcile the kind of Labour YIMBY side of pushing for as much housing as possible with Sarah's priorities, which are, of course, we have to keep them centred throughout, of building housing sustainably and with the correct insulation?
Well, from a skills perspective, we have a thriving home retrofit market, but it's been severely impacted by inconsistent and short-term policy, as we call boom and bust policy, over the years. What we do really need to ensure is that we actually protect the skills that we've got and we upskill. What can happen through government messaging and policy is that we end up cannibalizing our skill set to another sector, and then we actually lose the skills that we have, for instance, in the insulation sector, making sure that obviously those measures are going into homes. So what we should be doing is looking at this holistically. It's really crucial. We have to look at this as a supply chain in its entirety, not just in silo. And I can't go on about that enough. I'll even give you a quick figure. We did some illustrative net zero scenarios on the fabulous UK Green Building Council retrofit calculator, that when we actually combine these two sides of clean heat and power, and also a strong drive to home insulation, that we can cut electricity generation costs by 150 billion over 25 years. And if we do the meter measuring and monitoring, i.e. we ensure that consumers have those outcomes, that they have lower bills, that they have lower carbon in their homes, we can actually double those savings. So really powerful figures coming for us, that we need to be looking at this in the round, not just one-sided.
And a question I asked the Secretary of State when I interviewed him for our sister outlet Politics UK is, by what metric do you want the public to judge you? He told me it was business investment. And now, briefly, if we can go through the whole panel, how are we scoring the industrial strategy on that front? Do we think we'll achieve the business investment aims? Shall we start with Dan?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think that in the first instance,
Dan, we're struggling to hear you again. I'm very sorry. Okay, Sarah, would you like to chime in on that one?
Which Sarah?
Oh, Sarah KW, there you go.
Well, all I can say is I hope so, and I've got my fingers crossed. I know the businesses I've worked with who are already established British businesses, for instance, like Knauf Insulation, have already invested 0.5 billion in this country, in addition to what they already have, and also Rockwool in the Midlands. So, we're seeing that investment, but these are existing businesses. We hope that actually policy will support and won't actually drive them out. So I've got my fingers crossed. I won't hold my breath, but I want to see that consistent government messaging coming back about looking at this as a holistically rather than, as I said, siloed.
And from one Sarah to the next Sarah?
Yeah, I mean, like we've obviously had record levels of investment in the last 6 months or so, and huge steps forward with the recent trade deals, and then this coming behind it. And you know, it should just continue to grow that business confidence and see greater levels of investment as we go forward. So yeah, I mean, I'm incredibly optimistic about where we'll see things going.
Should we go to Mark now?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just on the previous point, just very quickly talking about sustainability and homes. Of course, you know, dense living is sustainable living. We have some of the oldest, least energy efficient housing in Europe. So certainly building new homes helps with sustainability. It definitely does. Will the industrial strategy achieve the government's investment aims? Well, of course, we hope it does. We hope it does. It's the right ambition. It identifies the right sectors. It produces or promises the right level of investment, but it does ultimately depend on delivery. Promises are one thing, delivery is another. And I think it's important to recognize that the politics of all of this is going to get harder from here on out. First year of the government is coming to an end. There was a difficult set of locals. There's probably going to be another difficult set of local elections in a year's time. So on the politics, it is going to be more difficult. So I think it's incumbent on all of us, parliamentarians, other people, other parts of the labour movement and civil society more broadly, to keep pressure on the government to be delivering what they promised.
Then should we go to Matt on that one as well?
Yes. So I think the challenge that we've got with all of this is the reality of a lot of what the government's policies have meant is that businesses are nervous at best of making the investments that we all would like to see. That's going to be your challenge. In terms of attracting investment, are there some good announcements? Amazon good the other day, but for instance, what's the impact on the high street? If I was still the MP for Boston, I'd be thinking, well, people do want their Amazon parcels to come faster, but they also want their high streets to thrive. There are some good stories, but there are not enough, and that's why I think it's behoving on anyone, regardless of political party, to try and keep up the pressure on this government to say, how do you really maximise every single thing? And it's all well and good talking about what happened under previous governments, but what Joe Public cares about, what the voters care about, is the future and the present, not the past.
And we're just coming to the end of our time today. So I'd firstly like to thank everyone for their time. I'd secondly like to wish everyone a happy National Sarah Day, or is it Global Sarah Day?
Must be global.
Must be global. And then, so as I say, thank everybody for the time. Thank you to our audience for attending. And for more events like this, but in person, I'd like to say everyone can reach out to the UKI and Curia websites for more information. So thank you, everybody, and happy Global Sarah Day.
Thanks,
Bye,
Jamie.
everybody.